with the discharges of untreated wastewater from the wastewater network. The notified plan had a permitted activity and a controlled activity in different areas for overflows. Submitters thought that that be more restrictive to recognise the NZCPS, the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. And we've accepted that position and gone to at least a restricted discretionary activity, depending on whether it's developed area or greenfield area. Sewage discharge from boats was one of the areas that had the most.
It's a long debate, that one.
Yes, sewage discharge had the most amount of debate, apart from mangroves probably. So prior to the unitary plan, we had the marine pollution regulations, which have a 500 metre limit for discharges. We'd extended that to 2 kilometres. There was both support and opposition to that change. The boat users were coming in saying there were practical and safety issues with that, and because of that, it would just encourage non-compliance with it to a greater degree than the 500 metre limit. Also questioning whether it was lawful to have the region-wide increase. So what we've gone to now is this back to the 500 metre limit from shore, but also put in a new restriction of not discharging in certain identified harbours, which are listed up there, to recognise that those harbours had gaps in the 500 metre area where it could cause amenity or water quality issues, and people don't want discharges when other people are mooring close by. Hull biofouling. This was a new topic that was brought in with the unitary plan to reflect policy that had come in with the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. So the original approach was a discretionary activity for in-water cleaning and passive discharges for macro fouling, so quite a high degree of biofouling on vessels. Submitters came in from the Defence Force and Port and MPI, saying remove it all because it was duplicating other regulations dealing with the same matter, or others were saying just amend it to make it more workable. And there was quite a lot of mediation and discussion around this, and quite a different approach taken, which everyone agreed to in the end. This now relates to in-water cleaning having a risk-based approach of listing different controls that need to be complied with depending on where the vessels come from and the type of organisms that might be attached. And for passive discharges, commercial and military vessels require these biofouling management plans to be produced. Underwater noise was another thing that was new to the unitary plan. We had included a threshold noise limit for all activities. Submitters were pointing out that it was hard to know which activities needed to apply it and how they would know whether they were over the threshold or not, and seeking that it be narrowed down to the issues of concern. So what we have done is specify particular activities that need consent, excluded business as usual activities such as ports and marinas, where we know those activities are generally within noise levels that don't affect marine mammals and other organisms, and now require acoustic assessments for marginal activities that may have adverse effects. Principally that's underwater blasting and piling and seismic surveys. Moorings. The notified plan takes an approach of consolidating moorings into the mooring zone. Moorings are permitted in the zone and need a consent outside the zone. Submitters came in seeking permitted activity for existing unconsented moorings outside the zone. Quite a lot of debate and discussion from people in Waiheke and Kawel, where they are property owners that need a mooring so they can access their sites, and also a lot from yachting groups who are seeking more room for anchoring, so they want less room for moorings. We've worked through all those discussions, and we've kept the requirement for existing moorings needing a coastal permit, but it's now discretionary in all areas outside the zone, including the overlays. In the zone itself, the mooring zones in the plan just built on the mooring management areas of the operative coastal plan. Three main areas where submitters were of concern: Okahu Bay, Ngāti Whātua Iraqi seeking complete removal of the mooring zone, Kawau Island seeking that the areas be reduced, and greater provision for property owners' moorings and reductions at Waiheke. The key change that we have agreed to there as council is to delete the Okahu Bay mooring. The moorings that are there are able to move to nearby areas. There's capacity nearby, and it recognises the value that Ngāti Whātua place on the Okahu Bay area. The houseboats at Rangihaua Creek at Waiheke Island changed to a permitted activity with very specific controls on what they need to do. There are 7 houseboats there which the plan provided for as a restricted discretionary activity, and the controls which the submitters had proposed largely met all the objectives that that activity was trying to address. And there were several other amendments refining where those areas were, so they just pulled in largely to where existing moorings are. Marina zone. The notified plan provides for the existing marinas within the marina zone and makes new marinas a non-compliant activity to encourage plan change requests or plan change processes rather than just resource consent processes. The marina operators wanted more provision for marina expansion and some refining of the provisions around things like car parking and food and beverage. So the council position, there's a change to allow for a 15% expansion of the existing marinas as a discretionary activity. Beyond that, it's non-complying, or in the overlays it's non-complying. There were some minor amendments to controls and assessment criteria. There were 2 extensions made to the zone areas, one at Pine Harbour to return to the extent in the operative plan, and at Half Moon Bay out to the edge of a volcanic view shaft from Bucklands Beach to Mount Wellington, where the submitter wanted to go further into that view shaft. The minor port zone, the provisions in the notified plan restricted that use of the land area to primarily port-related activities. The port sought greater provision for non-port activities, and other people sought that the Port of Onehunga allow for a mixed-use future. The council's position, the Port of Onehunga has some change there to allow more flexible use for some light industry. We also recognise that it is likely to change to a mixed-use area in future, but expect a plan change process for that to happen. At Gabador Place on the Tamaki, that has been rezoned to light industry with a precinct over the top to provide for both industry activities and marine-related activities. And then further information there, this topic was called 033 and 034, if anyone is seeking for that in the hearings website.
Fantastic. So we'll just go back and see if we've got questions. Yep, I see Councillor Webster and I see Councillor Cashmore. Just before you do, and just being really clear, in case anyone is wondering on the outside of council why we are just going through this and not debating and discussing, all of this has been debated and discussed at length. Our council position has been signed off by the Unitary Plan Committee, and it has been well debated and discussed by elected members. And I think what this is, the critical nature of this is, as I said, going into the decision-making time, whether this is perfect or not, these are the decisions that have been reached after taking into consideration, mediation and, or not, these are the position, not decision, position, that have been reached after a huge amount of discussion and hard work. And then the hearings panel will, they will then recommend on this. So just in case people are wondering why we're going through this in this way. Questions? Councillor Webster.
I don't want to hold the committee up, but I'd really like to get some more information on the outstanding issues at Kowau Island. People forget that, you know, Kowau Island doesn't have a central wharf. But every wharf is their driveway.
Yep.
So I don't want to hold up the meeting now.
Yeah, maybe I could show you later. We gave a PowerPoint presentation at the hearing showing the submitters' different views on the same screen. So basically the property owners were seeking that any unconsented moorings outside mooring zones got some provision to make them lawful.
Yep.
And the Yachting and Boating Association were seeking that all the mooring areas got smaller so that there were less room for moorings.
It's just that
we feel we got a compromise between those two.
Waiheke, and they're two totally different areas.
Yeah.
You're trying to catch up on that. Councillor Casey.
Oh, you probably disallow the question, but I was a bit surprised by the shift from the 2K sewage disposal from boats to the 500 metres with 6 accepted harbours. That's a huge shift in position. I didn't get it. That was all.
Yeah, that went through the unitary plan committee.
No, I remember it, and we had a position on it, but the position is, I think it's complete.
Do you want to remind people of the process? We'll just take a moment. I think this is a good example of the process.
I think why we're trying to be really cautious about the questions and the responses from staff is that we don't want to look like we're trying to replay the hearing because of the fact that we've given our evidence, we've been asked the questions by the panel. Because this is a public meeting, we need to be very careful that it doesn't look like we're trying to redo our case again, because then we could be in a position of people saying that we weren't satisfied with just the hearings process. So the situation is, this is where we got to with mediation and consideration of the issues with submitters and the position we took to the hearing. As Councillor Hulse has said, when we get the decisions of the panel, that will be the time to have recommendations of the panel. I'm doing it now. The recommendations of the panel. That will be the time when we can really debate whether or not that reflects the position that this council wants to take in the unitary plan. And so you'll be seeing Kath again when we get to those aspects of the recommendations on the coastal plan.
So at what stage are we flagging that there is an issue with a change to a position that we thought we had to the position that... Is it we're not doing that till August?
So
even though now we know there's...
Well, we don't actually know what the position of the panel is. All we're recording here is the position that officers took into hearings, and those positions went through either Auckland Development Committee, the Unitary Plan Committee, and if they were part of mediation, some of them went through the subgroup of the 4 members of the Unitary Plan Committee who were delegated to give direction at mediation.
It's the mediation bit. So when we leave it with, in my head, sorry, I'll just speak for myself. So I leave it with a position I think we've got, and I see then that through the next bit of the process there's been an alteration to it. So there's no way I can address that at this stage. It's somewhere later in the future.
Yeah, it's somewhere later in the future, and if you remember, every direction that subgroup of 4 Unitary Plan Committee members gave, we then reported back to the Unitary Plan Committee. Yep. So it was very clear that members of the wider committee who were not part of the 4 could track what changes have been made through mediation or the need to give urgent guidance.
I really apologise for this one slipping through then. That's dreadful.
But let's be clear, it's not a decision yet. It's only our position at the hearing. You will be able to debate this further when we get the recommendation from the panel, and we don't know what that might be.
It could be 2 kilometres.
Yeah.
I hope it is.
Exactly. And I think that's, without overstating it, that we do. If we want to get a good result in the end, we can't foreclose the decisions we can't foreclose on our ability to challenge and make decisions rationally out the other end. And, you know, believe you me, mediation isn't always perfect, and some of it is compromise, and some of it is actually listening to people and changing your mind, you know. That's just how it is. So this may well come back with a changed recommendation from the panel, and that may be a good thing.